the Western Roman Empire was gone. For centuries, Rome had dominated the Mediterranean world. Its armies conquered vast territories. Its laws shaped societies. Its roads connected continents. Its influence reached millions of people. Then, in 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor was removed from power. To many historians, this moment marks the end of the ancient world. Yet history rarely ends as cleanly as we imagine. Because while the West fragmented into smaller kingdoms, the Eastern Roman Empire survived. From its capital at Constantinople, Roman traditions continued. Roman laws continued. Roman culture continued. The empire that many people now call the Byzantine Empire remained one of the most powerful states on earth. Meanwhile, across Europe, a new age was beginning. An age of kings, warriors, migration, and uncertainty. Many of the old Roman institutions disappeared. Trade networks weakened. Cities shrank. Political power became decentralized. The world looked very different from the age of Augustus. Yet beneath the surface, important changes were taking place. New kingdoms emerged. New cultures formed. New identities developed. And far to the south, on the Arabian Peninsula, a transformation was quietly approaching. A transformation that would reshape civilization across 3 continents. At the beginning of the 7th century, Arabia was not viewed as the center of the world. It was a land of deserts, tribal alliances, caravan routes, merchant cities. Many communities were connected through trade rather than political unity. Different tribes followed different traditions, different beliefs, different loyalties. Then, around 570 CE, a man was born in the city of Mecca. His name was Muhammad. At the time, nobody could have predicted how profoundly his life would influence world history. Muhammad worked as a merchant. He traveled, observed different cultures, encountered different beliefs. Over time, he began receiving revelations that would form the foundation of Islam. His message emphasized faith in one God, justice, compassion, charity, personal responsibility. At first, the number of followers remained small. Many powerful figures in Mecca opposed the new movement. Tensions increased. Resistance grew. The future seemed uncertain. Yet history often changes because a small group of people refused to abandon an idea. Eventually, Muhammad and his followers migrated to the city of Medina. This event became one of the defining moments in Islamic history. From there, the movement continued expanding. Communities grew. Alliances formed. Influence spread. By the time of Muhammad's death in 632 CE, much of Arabia had been united under a shared faith and identity. What happened next surprised the world. The generations that followed expanded far beyond Arabia. The Rashidun Caliphate emerged. Its leaders guided a rapidly growing civilization. Within decades, territories once controlled by powerful empires came under Islamic rule. Former Byzantine lands, former Persian lands, important trade routes, major cities. The expansion was extraordinary, and it reshaped the political map of the ancient world. Yet the significance of this civilization extended far beyond conquest. Because one of the greatest achievements of the Islamic world would not be military. It would be intellectual. As new regions became connected, knowledge traveled with them. Ideas moved between cultures. Scholarship flourished. Ancient texts were preserved. Scientific curiosity expanded. The foundations of a remarkable intellectual age were being laid. An age that would soon transform mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. An age often remembered as the Islamic Golden Age. And at its heart stood one of the most extraordinary centers of learning the world had ever seen. The House of Wisdom. A place where knowledge itself became a treasure worth protecting. And that is where our story continues. The rise of Islam transformed the political landscape of the ancient world. But its greatest impact was still ahead. As territories expanded, a new challenge emerged. How do you govern a civilization stretching across vast distances? How do you unite people from different languages, traditions, and cultures? The answer came through a combination of administration, trade, scholarship, and innovation. After the Rashidun Caliphate came the Umayyad Caliphate. Under Umayyad rule, the Islamic world expanded even farther. Its territory stretched from the Iberian Peninsula in the west to regions near India in the east. Never before had such a vast area been connected under a single political system so quickly. Merchants traveled enormous distances. Ideas crossed continents. Goods moved between cultures. The world became increasingly interconnected. Yet success often creates new challenges. As the empire grew, debates emerged over leadership, governance, and the future direction of the civilization. Eventually, these tensions contributed to a major political transformation. The Abbasid Revolution. In 750 CE, the Abbasids came to power. The center of the Islamic world gradually shifted. And soon, a new city emerged that would become one of the greatest intellectual capitals in human history. Baghdad. Located near ancient centers of civilization in Mesopotamia, Baghdad was ideally positioned for trade and communication. Caravans arrived from distant regions. Merchants exchanged goods from across Eurasia. Scholars exchanged ideas from different civilizations. Knowledge flowed into the city from every direction. Baghdad quickly became one of the most important urban centers on earth. But what truly made the city remarkable was its attitude toward learning. The Abbasid rulers understood that knowledge could be a source of power, a source of prosperity, a source of progress, and so they invested heavily in scholarship. At the heart of this effort stood an institution that became legendary: the House of Wisdom. Imagine entering a place where some of the brightest minds in the world gathered to study. Books lined the shelves. Translators worked tirelessly. Mathematicians solved complex problems. Astronomers observed the heavens. Physicians studied medicine. Philosophers debated profound questions. The House of Wisdom was not merely a library. It was a center of intellectual ambition. One of the greatest knowledge projects in human history. Scholars collected texts from Greece, Persia, India, and many other regions. Ancient works that might otherwise have disappeared were copied, translated, and preserved. Think about that for a moment. Many ideas from classical civilizations survived because generations of scholars believed knowledge was worth protecting. Without those efforts, parts of humanity's intellectual heritage might have been lost forever. Yet preservation was only the beginning. The scholars of the Islamic Golden Age did not simply copy old ideas. They expanded them, improved them, built upon them. One field that experienced extraordinary progress was mathematics. A scholar named al-Khwarizmi made contributions so influential that his name eventually gave us the word algorithm. Today, algorithms help power computers, search engines, navigation systems, and artificial intelligence. Their roots stretch back more than 1,000 years. Algebra also advanced dramatically. Methods for solving equations became more sophisticated. Mathematical thinking became more systematic. The foundations of modern mathematics grew stronger. Astronomy flourished as well. Scholars carefully observed the movements of stars and planets. They refined measurements, improved calculations, developed instruments that increased accuracy. Their work helped future generations better understand the universe. Medicine advanced through observation and study. Doctors recorded treatments, analyzed symptoms, compiled medical knowledge into detailed texts. Many of these works would remain influential for centuries. The Islamic Golden Age became one of history's great intellectual periods. A reminder that civilizations are remembered not only for military victories, but for discoveries, for curiosity, for the pursuit of understanding. Yet while Baghdad flourished, another transformation was unfolding elsewhere. Far to the west, Europe was slowly emerging from centuries of fragmentation. New kingdoms were forming. New rulers were rising. And one leader would attempt to revive the idea of a united empire in the West. His name was Charlemagne. And his story would help shape the future of medieval Europe. The age of scholars was flourishing. But the age of kings was far from over. The Islamic Golden Age was transforming science, mathematics, and philosophy. Baghdad flourished. Knowledge flowed across continents. Scholars preserved ideas that might otherwise have disappeared forever. Yet while intellectual centers prospered in the East, Western Europe was experiencing a very different journey. The fall of the Western Roman Empire had left a power vacuum. Old institutions vanished. Trade networks weakened. Political authority fragmented. Instead of one dominant empire, numerous kingdoms competed for influence. For centuries, Europe remained divided. Then a ruler emerged who dreamed of restoring unity. His name was Charlemagne. History remembers him as Charles the Great. Born in the 8th century, Charlemagne inherited a growing Frankish kingdom. But he wanted more than a kingdom. He wanted stability, order, expansion. Over decades, he led military campaigns across large portions of Western Europe. Territories expanded. Rivals were defeated. Influence increased. Gradually, he created the largest political entity Western Europe had seen since the fall of Rome. In the year 800, a symbolic moment changed history. On Christmas Day, Charlemagne was crowned emperor by the Pope in Rome. The event carried enormous significance. It suggested that the idea of empire in the West had not died after all. A new era was beginning. The empire Charlemagne built would not survive intact forever. Yet his legacy endured. Future rulers looked back to him as a model. His reign helped lay foundations for what later became known as the Holy Roman Empire. And perhaps most importantly, he encouraged education, administration, and cultural development. For a brief moment, Europe experienced a period of renewal. Yet unity remained fragile. After Charlemagne's death, his empire gradually fragmented. Local rulers gained influence. Regional identities strengthened. Political authority became increasingly decentralized. Out of this environment emerged a system that would dominate medieval Europe for centuries. Feudalism. At its core, feudalism was a practical response to insecurity. In a world where governments were often weak, protection became extremely valuable. Powerful lords controlled land. Warriors provided military service. Farmers worked the fields. Relationships were built around obligations and loyalty. The system was far from perfect. Opportunities were limited. Social mobility was rare. Life could be difficult for ordinary people. Yet feudalism provided a degree of stability during uncertain times. Across Europe, castles appeared. Massive stone fortifications designed to protect communities and project power. Knights became symbols of military service. Nobles governed local territories. The medieval world took shape. But even as Europe adapted to its new reality, a different challenge arrived from the north. One that struck fear into coastal communities across the continent. The Vikings. The first reports seemed almost unbelievable. Long ships appeared suddenly from the sea. Fast. Silent. Unexpected. Then, just as quickly, they disappeared again. The Vikings originated in Scandinavia. Modern Norway. Sweden. Denmark. For generations, they developed extraordinary skills as sailors and navigators. Their ships allowed them to travel farther than many believed possible. Soon, Viking voyages expanded dramatically. They raided coastal settlements, explored distant territories, established trade networks, and founded new communities. Some traveled east toward Russia. Others moved west toward the British Isles. Some even reached North America centuries before Columbus. The Viking Age became one of the most dynamic periods in medieval history. Yet popular imagination often focuses only on Viking warriors. The reality was far more complex. Vikings were also traders, explorers, craftsmen, settlers. They connected distant regions through commerce and cultural exchange. Their influence stretched across vast areas. And wherever they arrived, history changed. One region particularly affected by Viking activity was England. Kingdoms faced repeated attacks. Political leaders struggled to respond. Many settlements were vulnerable. Many rulers were unprepared. Then a remarkable leader emerged. Alfred the Great, King of Wessex. Unlike many rulers who simply reacted to Viking raids, Alfred adapted. He strengthened defenses, improved military organization, encouraged education, promoted legal reforms. His efforts helped preserve his kingdom during one of the most difficult periods in English history. More importantly, they helped shape the future development of England itself. Alfred became one of the most respected rulers of the medieval era. A reminder that leadership is often tested most severely during times of crisis. As the centuries passed, Europe slowly became more organized. Kingdoms grew stronger. Trade increased. Population expanded. Cities began recovering. The foundations of a new world were emerging. Yet beyond Europe's borders, powerful civilizations continued rising and falling. And soon, events in the Middle East would bring East and West into direct confrontation. A confrontation remembered as the Crusades. A series of conflicts that would reshape politics, religion, trade, and cultural exchange for generations. The medieval world was becoming increasingly connected. And increasingly dangerous. The next chapter would prove just how interconnected civilization had become. The medieval world was becoming increasingly connected. Trade routes linked distant regions. Religion spread across continents. Ideas traveled farther than ever before. Yet greater connection often brings greater tension. By the end of the 11th century, one issue began drawing enormous attention across Europe. The Holy Land. For centuries, Jerusalem had held profound significance for Christians, Muslims, and Jews alike. Pilgrims traveled there. Merchants passed through it. Empires competed over it. As political circumstances changed, tensions increased. In 1095, Pope Urban II delivered a speech that would help launch one of the most famous periods in medieval history. The Crusades. His message spread rapidly throughout Europe. Nobles listened. Knights listened. Ordinary people listened. Many believed they were being called to participate in a sacred mission. Others saw opportunities for wealth, land, or status. Some simply followed the momentum of events. Whatever their reasons, thousands answered the call. Soon, armies began moving eastward. The First Crusade was underway. The journey was long, difficult, dangerous. Many participants had never traveled far from home. Now they were crossing continents, facing unfamiliar cultures, entering regions they barely understood. Against enormous odds, the First Crusade eventually succeeded in capturing Jerusalem. The victory stunned much of the medieval world. New crusader states emerged. Political tensions deepened. And what began as a single campaign evolved into a series of conflicts lasting centuries. The Crusades left a complicated legacy. They brought violence and suffering. Yet they also increased contact between civilizations. Knowledge moved across cultural boundaries. Trade expanded. New ideas circulated. The Mediterranean became a crossroads where different worlds interacted more intensely than ever before. Among the most respected leaders of this era was Saladin, a Muslim ruler whose reputation extended far beyond his own civilization. Known for his military skill, leadership, and diplomacy, Saladin became one of the defining figures of the crusading age. Even many of his opponents respected him. His campaigns helped reshape the balance of power in the Middle East. And his legacy remains influential to this day. Yet while crusaders and Muslim rulers struggled for influence, an even greater storm was gathering far to the east. A storm unlike anything the world had ever witnessed. A storm named Temujin. History remembers him by another name. Genghis Khan. Born into a world of tribal rivalries on the vast grasslands of Mongolia, Genghis Khan faced hardship from an early age. His family endured poverty. His alliances were fragile. His future seemed uncertain. Few people looking at the young boy could have imagined what he would become. But Genghis possessed extraordinary determination, extraordinary intelligence, and an extraordinary understanding of leadership. Over time, he united competing tribes that had spent generations fighting one another. This achievement alone would have been remarkable. It was only the beginning. Once united, the Mongols became one of the most effective military forces in history. Their mobility was unmatched. Their discipline was exceptional. Their communication systems were revolutionary. Their commanders adapted quickly to changing circumstances. Again and again, they defeated opponents who possessed larger populations, greater wealth, and stronger fortifications. Kingdoms fell. Empires collapsed. Cities surrendered. The Mongol expansion moved with astonishing speed. Within a relatively short period, they created the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Their influence stretched from East Asia deep into Europe. Entire civilizations suddenly found themselves connected through a single political framework. For many communities, The arrival of the Mongols was terrifying. Stories of their conquests spread rapidly. Fear often traveled ahead of their armies. Yet the Mongol Empire was more than conquest alone. As stability gradually emerged across vast territories, trade flourished. Travel became safer. Communication improved. The Silk Road experienced a remarkable revival. Historians sometimes refer to this period as the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. Merchants traveled enormous distances. Ideas crossed continents. Technologies spread between cultures. Knowledge moved from east to west and from west to east. Paper, gunpowder, navigation techniques, scientific ideas, all traveled more efficiently through interconnected networks. For perhaps the first time in history, large portions of Eurasia became linked through sustained exchange. The world was becoming smaller, more connected, more interdependent, and that connection would have enormous consequences. Because when ideas travel, innovation follows. When trade expands, prosperity follows. And when civilizations interact, transformation follows. The Mongol Empire would eventually fragment. Like every empire before it. Like every empire after it. Yet the connections it created would outlast its political power. Those connections helped prepare the world for the next great transformation. A transformation driven by exploration, discovery, curiosity, and a growing desire to understand both the world and humanity's place within it. The medieval era was approaching its end. A new age was waiting beyond the horizon. An age of renaissance, exploration, and global change. And civilization was about to enter one of its most revolutionary chapters. The medieval era was approaching its end. For centuries, kingdoms had risen and fallen. Crusaders had crossed continents. Mongol horsemen had connected vast regions of Eurasia. Trade routes carried goods and ideas farther than ever before. Yet the world was about to change again. And this transformation would begin with catastrophe. In the 14th century, a deadly disease swept across continents. Historians know it as the Black Death. Originating somewhere in Asia, the plague traveled along trade routes that connected civilizations. Merchant ships carried it. Caravans carried it. Human movement carried it. By the time people understood what was happening, it was already too late. Cities suffered devastating losses. Villages disappeared. Entire communities were transformed. Fear spread faster than information. Many people believed the end of the world had arrived. The Black Death became one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. Yet history often moves in unexpected directions. The tragedy reshaped economies, changed labor systems, altered social structures, and helped create conditions for a remarkable cultural rebirth. A rebirth known as the Renaissance. The word itself means rebirth. And that is exactly what many people believed they were experiencing. Across Italy, scholars rediscovered ancient texts. Artists studied classical ideas. Thinkers questioned old assumptions. Curiosity flourished. Human potential became a central focus. For centuries, knowledge had survived in monasteries, libraries, and centers of learning. Now it was spreading rapidly. One city after another became a center of creativity. Florence, Venice, Milan, Rome. The Renaissance transformed art, science, literature, architecture, and philosophy. Among its greatest figures was Leonardo da Vinci. Few individuals better represent the spirit of the Renaissance. Painter, inventor, engineer, scientist, observer. Leonardo seemed endlessly curious about the world. He studied anatomy, designed machines, sketched flying devices centuries before powered flight became possible, and created works of art that remain famous today. His life reflected a powerful idea. Human beings could learn almost anything if they were willing to ask questions and seek answers. The Renaissance encouraged that mindset. And the results changed history. At nearly the same time, another revolution was underway. The spread of information. For centuries, books had been copied by hand. The process was slow, expensive, limited. Then Johannes Gutenberg introduced a technology that transformed communication forever. The printing press. Suddenly, information could be reproduced far more efficiently. Books became more accessible. Ideas spread more quickly. Knowledge reached larger audiences. The pace of change accelerated. The printing press became one of the most influential inventions in human history. It empowered education, encouraged literacy, and helped ideas travel farther than ever before. Meanwhile, curiosity about the wider world continued growing. Merchants wanted new trade routes. Kings wanted new opportunities. Explorers wanted new discoveries. The known world no longer seemed large enough. European powers began looking outward, toward distant oceans, toward unexplored horizons, toward possibilities beyond imagination. One of the most famous explorers was Christopher Columbus. In 1492, he sailed westward across the Atlantic Ocean. His goal was to find a route to Asia. Instead, he encountered lands unknown to Europeans. The consequences were enormous. New connections formed between continents. Goods moved across oceans. Cultures encountered one another in unprecedented ways. The world became more interconnected than ever before. Not long afterward, another explorer achieved a breakthrough that many had sought for generations. Vasco da Gama. By sailing around Africa and reaching India by sea, he established a direct maritime route connecting Europe and Asia. The implications were revolutionary. Trade patterns shifted. Economic power shifted. Global interaction increased dramatically. The age of exploration had begun. Ships crossed oceans. Maps expanded. Empires extended their reach. Entire continents became linked through growing networks of commerce and communication. For better and for worse, humanity was becoming a global civilization. Yet exploration was only the beginning. The discoveries of this age would fuel competition. Competition would fuel empire. Empire would fuel conflict. And conflict would reshape the world once again. New powers were rising. New technologies were emerging. New ideas were challenging old beliefs. The Renaissance had transformed how people thought. The age of exploration had transformed how people traveled. Soon, another transformation would change how people governed, how they fought, and how they understood freedom itself. The modern world was beginning to take shape. And the next chapter would bring revolutions that would alter the course of human history forever.